DNA testing and genetic evaluation can return dividends to your operation. And collecting DNA samples to get started is as easy addition as any processing routine. Cattleman to Cattleman reporter Brian Baxter has more.
The growing availability and wider use of DNA technology on seed stock, cow-calf, and feedlot operations across the country is giving leading producers an edge in making more informed breeding and herd management decisions faster. So how difficult is it to get started?
Getting started is easy. Pfizer Animal Genetics is happy to provide on a complimentary basis hair sample collectors or FTA blood cards. We can also have producers submit samples in the form of semen samples. Any of those will provide DNA necessary for our tests. What happens is that the producer that wants to get started can call one of our sales representatives, and we're happy to get the sample collectors into their hands as quickly as possible. Once the samples then are taken, we advise the producer to be diligent about filling out the forms and making sure that the animal identification matches nicely with the paperwork and the sample collector. So upon arrival at Pfizer Animal Genetics, the DNA will be extracted, and then the genotypes for the markers, depending on the panel, will be determined. And those genotypes then will go into our computer, and prediction equations will be applied to those genotypes such that we can then equate them to the genomic breeding value or molecular value prediction that are associated with various traits for that particular animal.
I think the important thing is to understand it is a complex process, and probably when we look at pictures of the lab and discuss things about the lab, it may be a bit understated because there's so much automation and technology behind it that it actually looks a little simpler than it is. Fortunately, though, for us, we have an excellent team of individuals that work throughout the process from the DNA extraction all the way to the development of the customer report. And those individuals really put a lot of effort into everything there and really make sure that we're able to deliver quality predictions every time.
While taking DNA samples on the ranch is not difficult, as with any operation, there are a few key factors to keep in mind.
The more that it can be part of our normal animal processing at various times of the year, the better. You know, for example, most producers will do breeding soundness exams on their bull battery in the spring of the year prior to turnout for spring calving cow herds. And that's a great time to get DNA samples on your bull battery for testing. At the same time, when calves go through preconditioning, either before or shortly after weaning, that's a great time to go ahead and get DNA samples. And on the cow side of the equation, either at pregnancy check time or when they come through for their normal animal health regime, those all represent opportune times to gather DNA. So if you're using FTA blood cards and you're pricking the ear and getting a drop of blood on the card, it's important to use a different needle every time for every animal so that you don't have DNA from one animal get contaminated with DNA on a subsequent animal. It's also important to let those cards become thoroughly dry before packaging them and sending them.
And more detail on sample collection is available from Pfizer Animal Genetics to take a producer step by step through the process.
We have all the directions necessary to get samples collected on your animals. It's easy to fill out the paperwork, and it's then quite easy to receive the reports and the results and get a hold of either one of us in technical services or one of our sales representatives, and we're happy to go over those results for you.
Usually in less than 30 days, a producer can have in hand the DNA data that will allow them to make decisions based on what they know about an animal, not just what they see.
Now, Kent, is the process for Angus breeders who are collecting and submitting samples to AGI any different from what we've just seen?
Kevin, let's just walk through what an Angus breeder would do step by step to test animals. First step would be to contact Angus Genetics Inc., AGI, and request FTA card collectors. Those are blood spot card collectors. Second step would be to get on to the American Angus Association's website into the secured member section. There's a very efficient, easy way then where where members can pull up their animal inventory and flag animals that they will be submitting samples on for testing. Then the samples are submitted to AGI, where they double check to make sure that those animals are on file, and then they batch those samples and send them to Pfizer Animal Genetics, where we run the high-density 50K genotypes and produce the genomic predictions. We then send those genomic predictions back to AGI, and they report the results to customers in the form of genomic enhanced EPDs and percent ranks.
Well, tell us more about those reports and the results that we get back as a result of this DNA testing.
Yeah, first I would just offer that on the public version of the American Angus Association website, it shows whether or not animals are tested by virtue of nomenclature that says PF50 at the upper left-hand corner of the query screen if you use the animal EPD lookup, as well as if you click and highlight on animals that are pulled up from the search engines. And so if that designation is there, you know that the EPDs are powered by HD50K. But in addition to that, Kevin, the customer will also get back percent ranks that are associated exclusively with the genomic predictions from 50K, with lower numbers indicating higher or more favorable percent ranks. So an animal that, say, has a 10% rank for a trait like dry matter intake would rank in the most favorable 10% of the population for low dry matter intake. And those percent ranks then, as suggested there, go beyond just the EPD traits, but include dry matter intake, residual feed intake, and tenderness, which are traits that are only reported through genomic means and not EPDs. The dry matter intake does impact the EPDs for residual average daily gain behind the scenes.
Gotcha. Yeah, I love the percentile ranking because I was in high school in the half the class that made the upper half possible. So both halves have a lot of relevance. Gerald, I want to ask you a question. If folks want to get started with this technology, what advice and suggestions would you give them?
Well, what we do at Express Ranches, Kevin, is at weaning time, we go through, and one of those cards that Kent was talking about, we actually take a blood sample from every calf we wean. We archive it at the ranch. As we went through the problem with genetic abnormalities and other things, with parentage verification and other things, we decided that was a good policy, and I'd recommend that to all purebred producers. And then what we do with the cattle that we identify that we want to turn in for genomic enhanced EPDs, we make sure we turn that in at least 2 months prior to when we want to go to catalog or go to press with that information. And so we always have that information on every animal, every purebred that's born at the ranch, and then we submit it at least 2 months prior to when we want to start on the catalog.
Very good. Did you know that you can find Pfizer Animal Health on Facebook and Twitter? Like us on Facebook at facebook.com/PAHUS/livestock, and follow us on Twitter at Pfizer_beef.